So expect certainly this week Partygate to come, well, thundering, possibly in quite a big way, back into the headlines. And of course, we've had this weekend many Conservative MPs, Jacob Rees-Mogg among them, come out and say, Partygate's no longer an issue. That's in the past. Forget about it. Please, please forget about it. But this goes to show you how out of touch the Tories really, really are over Partygate. And not just Partygate, but with the general electorate that put them in power as well. Because it's not just non-Tory voters that are angry, it's also Tory voters who are angry at Boris Johnson. And one of the things that we've seen, especially in the last two by-elections, was there was a demotivation factor that happened in many sort of traditional Tory voters. Now, it's not that they changed their vote over to the Lib Dems, although some did. A lot just felt that they couldn't bring themselves to go out and vote Tory. And as a result, they just didn't go out and vote, which again contributed to the two by-election wins we saw in Chesham and Amersham, and of course, the other one as well. Can't remember the name of the place, but again, and those were, quote, two very strong Tory strongholds. Now, of course, we don't know, of course, when the next general election could be. Could be 2023, could be 2024. We still really don't know. But the fact that Boris Johnson has gone into full, as he says, election mode, and especially for the next 2 years, shows how desperate he really is to get his core supporters back on side. So what is the anger underneath this? And how angry are people about this? Well, you might be surprised. They are very, very angry indeed about this. So, as always, before we go diving into the article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, this comes from The Guardian with the title of Boris Johnson may think that Partygate is a laughing matter, but outraged voters don't. He thinks he's going to get away with it. When Boris Johnson addressed a recent dinner with his parliamentary party, he poked fun at those Tory MPs who were disgusted by Partygate that then tried to remove him. The king of crass comedy quipped that they should be grateful that they did not have to live in Russia, where Vladimir Putin has nobody to write 54 letters to Sir Graham Bradsky. And he was especially mocking of those Conservative MPs who wrote to demand a confidence vote and then withdrew their letters after the invasion of Ukraine, saying these massives were elastic and they go away when you pull out. And again, it's just goes to show you the sense of entitlement and absolute surety that Boris Johnson thinks he's got away with this. And it also shows you the split that will happen, because we've said this, I don't know how many times. If Boris goes, whoever replaces him is not going to be able to paper over the deep fundamental cracks in the Labour Party along the different factional lines that Boris Johnson helped to even create and foster. Boris cannot hold those cracks back himself much longer either. It's been said that if Boris were to have another serious gaffe, such as Partygate, there's no telling how if he may be able to hold them back this time. And I don't think he will if there's another, shall we say, serious gaffe coming. And bear remember, this is Boris Johnson. Of course, there's one coming down the line. Just a few weeks ago, he stood at the precipice of losing the premiership. And someone who ought to know tells me the number of letters submitted to Sir Graham got close to that threshold and would have triggered a confidence vote. Now the Prime Minister feels able to wine, dine, and crack wise about his MPs, and now do so in the very same week that the Metropolitan Police started issuing penalty fines for law breaking at number 10, imposing over 20 fines in the first wave, with more expected to follow. It is appalling enough that the Met had found a pattern of criminality at the very heart of government, and it is worse that the Prime Minister treats this as a laughing matter. And one senior Tory present at the dinner says the number of jokes Boris devoted to Partygate showed that he is either monumentally insensitive or monumentally self-confident, or both. This confirms that Mr. Johnson feels neither genuine shame nor even sincere remorse for his rampant lockdown busting parties in Downing Street during the pandemic. It also tells us that the scandal has not changed the essential character one jot, and ought to alarm anyone, including Tory MPs, who laughed along with his jokes. We've said this before. Boris Johnson is the clown who gets away with stuff. He's really not the person you should be having as the Prime Minister, someone who you need to take serious with this stuff. But they've put him in, and they're laughing along with him for the time being, which is exactly the way that the Republicans did with Trump. And look what happened to their party. They may have found, of course, the Prime Minister funny, but there is no reason to suppose that the country also feels entertained. On their way to the revelries at the Park Plaza Hotel near Westminster Bridge, Conservative MPs had to pass protesting groups of bereaved families of COVID casualties who shouted, "Shame on you," and "Off to another party are we?" Those who have lost loved ones, often despite being denied the opportunity to hold the hand of a dying relative for one last time, or even attend a funeral, have not forgotten or will forgive. Partygate cut through to the public much more widely and much more deeply than the typical political scandal. Everyone can grasp the stark hypocrisy of the denizens of Downing Street flouting the restrictions that they imposed on everyone else. Nor can it be disputed that Mr. Johnson has issued repeatedly false denials about it, both in Parliament and public. He remains under investigation himself, and the events he attended, including the notorious Bring Your Own Booze party organised by his private secretary. The Prime Minister's excuse that he mistook a garden party with people chugging wine for a work event. It is no less risible now than it was when the first time he concocted the alibi. At Westminster, Partygate is largely treated as yesterday's news, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, as we said earlier before, the cabinet specialist in defending the indefensible, has tried to exploit the war to dismiss the scandals as disproportionate fluff. But voters do not think the same way as politicians, and telling them that they were silly to be affronted by Partygate makes them even crosser. The public is capable of holding two thoughts in its head at one time. The war in Ukraine is a grave international crisis, and of course, law breaking at number 10 is a grave issue for Britain's democracy. And polling companies also agree that the public have settled on a verdict that is unlikely to change, whatever happens next. They have made up their minds about the Prime Minister, and James Johnson, a pollster who sampled opinion for the Tories when Theresa May was in number 10, reports there has been a constant picture in all our focus groups since the start of January. He quotes one voter describing the Tory leader as a buffoon, a joke, an idiot, and worst of all, a liar. And you can't have a liar. Another calls him a Hippocratic clown. The third settles for one seeming but searing example of pathetic. Again, always you could describe Boris Johnson well before Partygate, but now only voters have cottoned on. But again, that's the point of the entire Boris Johnson persona. He gets you laughing and you're laughing along with him, and before you realize it, he's in power doing all the things you were laughing at him for, and then you realize, hold on, what's going on here? And of course, when the revelations about Partygate were at the most intense, Mr. Johnson's approval ratings plunged to the depths not visited by any Prime Minister in more than 25 years. I do not think that popularity has regained at all, by the way. Anyway, we continue the article. He remains deeply unpopular, but there has also been a scant sign of the rally to the flag, to benefit that Number 10 would hope to result from the outbreak of the most serious conflict in Europe since 1945. Johnson loyalists who have talked deleteriously about the war, providing him with a, quote, Falklands moment, and have shown themselves in need of a very good lesson in good taste, a history tutorial, and of course the attention of a clinician. Again, I don't see how they think the Ukraine crisis is going to save them from this. I really don't see a way out for them from this. Anyway, it continues. The Tories, of course, are now beginning to twitch about the local elections in early May. I think they are going to be bad, possibly very bad, especially in London, says one Conservative MP. These tests of public opinion will be immediately preceded by a hike in the rate of national insurance biting into pay packets for the first time, a huge jump in energy bills, and of course surging prices for many other essentials. Litigating the warning times of staff shortages have also contributed to the unprecedented sharp fall in public satisfaction with the National Health Service. If Tories are again thumped at the ballot box this spring, it will be hard to say definitively how much of it is down to Partygate, and of course how much of it is about the state of public services and the squeeze on household budgets. And we've said before, this is going to be an absolute perfect storm, when this happens. And it's all the Tories' fault. They've been in power now for almost 15 years. They've got no one else to blame but themselves. They've governed themselves into this mess, and they can't govern themselves out of a paper bag, to be honest. Anyway, what we do know, of course, from past experience, is that voters get angrier about political scandals when they are made feeling miserable about their own circumstances. And some Tories do see the danger of their leader in a very seething fury about Partygate, combining with the discontent about the cost of living crisis. One says, it will make some of my colleagues more susceptible to the argument that we won't win the next election if we don't change leader. And that is becoming a more and more popular talking point in the Tory party, by the way. You see that more and more. And as we've seen very recently, Penny Mordaunt being put forward as the new challenger, potentially, to Boris. A lot of the moderates are rallying round her, which, again, someone to watch in the near future. Anyway, back to it. Even some of Johnson's loyalists believe he is not out of the woods yet. The police investigation into over a dozen events in Downing Street during the pandemic, not at least 3, which were attended by the Prime Minister, is far from exhausted. No previous British Prime Minister has been found to have broken the criminal law while in office, and if the police do serve him with a fine, he will be in a position, always previously held by the untenable, of a lawmaking but exposed as a lawbreaker. And Conservative MPs will have to decide whether to remove him or make themselves accessories to the crime. And remember, this is the party of law and order. It does not look good if you've got a Prime Minister who is breaking laws and then you're doing nothing about it. Well, again, passing all these, new criminal laws that you love to bang on about. Look how good we're doing on crime, which is, again, a regular Tory battle cry. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all, because at any next general election, if you come out and say, oh, well, the Conservatives are the party of law and order, what about Boris Johnson? You didn't do a thing about him when he broke the law. So, and of course, context will matter a lot to their calculations. It's about the timing, says one former Tory cabinet. If he gets fined when Ukraine is still the centre of attention or some other emergency has erupted, then there will be a reduced chance of Mr. Johnson being defenestrated by his MPs. If not, he will be in greater danger of being ejected at the hands of his own party. Even if he does try to escape the police penalty, many of the public have already concluded that the Prime Minister is an incorrigible, malicious rule breaker. That is the problem, not just for the Conservative Party, but for everyone else too. One of the many damaging dimensions of this scandal is the seriously compromised of the capacity of the government to carry people with it at the same time when the effective plausible leadership is vitally necessary. The hard and perilous times, a leader has to be able to ask the difficult things of people in the national interest. And this is a period when Britain needs a prime minister who can convince the country that the sanctions needed to be made for the sake of helping the Ukrainians to resist the Russians in order to cope with the global energy crisis, or in the event that COVID springs up a very another nasty surprise on us. Mr. Johnson cannot be that prime minister. He has long lost the trust of the public, and he will not win it back amongst his own MPs. Many still want him gone, not least for fear of what might happen next if the greased piglet somehow manages to squirm his way out of Partygate. One senior Tory remarks, if Boris gets away with this, he will think he can get away with anything. And that's a formula for more and quite possibly worse outrages to come. Boris Johnson may think he's done with Partygate, but the anger about it has not been done with him. We've said this time and time again when it came to this issue. Why on earth would you put Boris Johnson in charge? Because you don't just have a look at his time as tenure as Prime Minister to see that the gaffes, the danger of this guy being Prime Minister would be damaging to the Tory party brand. Look at his time when he was Foreign Secretary. Look at the time when he was, Mayor of London. Those two situations alone should have more than been enough to disqualify him from this position. But of course, no. Boris Johnson has that unfortunate nefariosity of being able to charm people. And unfortunately, a lot of people fall for that time and time again of, oh, it's just Boris, we'll forgive him this time. And that's unfortunately where it is put up with us. We've got a guy who is a liar, shock horror. But in the article, it gets it absolutely right. You cannot be asking the people of the British people to be making sacrifices in the national interest while clearly not be willing to make those sacrifices yourself. And also the fact that COVID may decide to spring another surprise on us is entirely possible. I've said it before, COVID is not done. It is far from over from done with us. And who knows how many people this time will be willing to comply with restrictions, thinking, well, I'm not going to comply with restrictions because Boris didn't last time. And that could lead to some huge problems. But those don't bear thinking about. It's touch wood situation. Please, COVID, go away. We're done with you. Just go away. We've got other problems to deal with at the moment. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, leave your thoughts down below in the comments down below as well. And of course, thank you for all the people who do support the channel with the Patreon page. And of course, the Buy Me Coffee link down below as well. And of course, we'll see you all next time.